Access to Democracy is made possible by donations from the following organizations. Thomson Reuters, a global company with expertise and insight to unravel complex situations in the areas of law, tax, compliance, government, and media. Their worldwide network of journalists and editors keep customers up to speed on relevant global events. Crutchfield Dermatology, a full-service treatment center and Medi-Spa in Eagan. Their goal is to help you look good and feel great with beautiful skin. With service built around courtesy, dignity, and respect, Mayo-trained Dr. Charles Crutchfield personally treats each patient and is acknowledged as one of the nation's best physicians. Truestone Financial, with locations in Minnesota and Wisconsin, has proudly served its members since 1939. Truestone engages, educates, and supports its members to ensure they have the tools to empower their financial well-being. Truestone Financial, your neighborhood credit union. Learn more at truestone.org. Edina Eye Physicians and Surgeons, a division of Twin Cities Eye Consultants, has proudly served the Twin Cities for more than 55 years now in 7 convenient locations. Using the most advanced technology combined with human touch, Edina Eye offers comprehensive services and dedicated specialists committed to excellence with innovative procedures and expertise for the most advanced eye care.
Welcome to this edition of Access to Democracy. It's one of the first shows of 2022, and as people will name, we're in the midst of another outbreak of the pandemic, so I have a couple of preliminary questions. Are you guys vaccinated?
We are both vaccinated.
Do you have a booster?
We do.
And have you been tested?
Today?
Yes.
Negative.
I was tested last night.
Sure.
We can get rid of our masks.
There we go.
Oh, wait. We both have N95s. You got a different mask.
I do. I have a fancy KN94 that fits my tiny little face better than the N95s.
Is a 94 less effective than a 95?
I hope not.
I hope not, too.
I think not.
Anyway, today we have 2 of my favorite attorneys. I always was delighted when they would appear before the Supreme Court and make arguments. Very different styles. You're very different. We'll maybe get into that. But both very effective, and you're both from Dakota County. So welcome. Can you give us a little bit of introduction for yourself? Let's start with Melissa.
Well, I grew up in Dakota County. I grew up in Apple Valley. I went to Apple Valley and Rosemount schools. I've pretty much lived here most of my life, except for when I was in school, in college, and raised our kids here. They went to 196 schools.
Oh, so you can really claim credentials as a native, right?
I sure can. I live in Lakeville right now, and I'm not planning on moving out of the county ever.
Jeff, yourself.
I'm a little short of that mark myself. I've been here for probably, 35 years.
Here's Dakota County.
Here in good old Dakota County, yep. We moved our family and began our family here in Dakota County shortly after we both graduated from law school. My office has been here in Dakota County since the day I started practicing law.
So, my question for you, sir, is you recently received an award, I think, as being an iconic Minnesota attorney. What does it mean, or what does it take to be an iconic attorney as you're being awarded for?
Well, you have to start by being old. That's the first criteria. You have to be 60 or older, and I was honored with that. In my first year of eligibility, I think they count that in the Hall of Fame for sports as how many years of eligibility you passed.
But age is not the only requirement.
No, we all get there if we're lucky. So yeah, it's it was an award handed out by Minnesota's leading legal publication called Minnesota Lawyer. And they had, over the course of my career, recognized landmark decisions. In fact, they've 3 times named me Attorney of the Year. And so when it came time for me to be eligible for icon status, I was honored to be nominated and selected as a Minnesota icon in the world of criminal defense.
I am going to get into that a little bit later, but I want to first, if you mind, defer to the lovely lady to your right, Melissa. So you went to school in Dakota County, Rosemount.
I did. I went to Diamond Path Elementary School, Rosemount Middle School, and Rosemount High School.
Did you graduate from Rosemount?
I did not graduate from Rosemount High School.
What? Did you drop out?
I did. I dropped out of high school.
I would never have believed that.
Well, I have come far since then, but yeah, I dropped out when I was 16. Took a little bit of a different path to getting through college and law school, but by the time I was 23, I was sworn in as a lawyer and started my career as a public defender.
So, if I understand it right, you were in Missouri when you took your GED?
I did, yes.
And you scored the highest of anybody in Missouri at that time?
At the time. It was a long time ago. I'm sure the record's been broken, but yeah, and I got a nice scholarship to get me started.
You got a scholarship as a result?
I did.
I mean, I want to probe this a little bit because there are other young people out there who are seeking their ways, and so do you have any advice? I mean, you turned out pretty well. I mean, be a lawyer by 23. Any advice for them as these alternative paths?
Well, if I knew then what I'd know now, I might have stayed in school because it's a rougher path to not stay in school. I encouraged my own children to stay in school, and I'm glad they did. But I think stay in school, and whatever you can do, find some grown-ups.
Were there any people who were important to you on this path?
I had a couple grown-ups in my life who encouraged me and supported me and made sure that I kept my head down and didn't lose my way. So I was very fortunate.
Yeah. I want to get to what you do, but I don't dwell on this. But this is important. I mean, you advise people stay in school and seek out mentors who will help you along the way. So, what do you do?
Well, I work for the public defender system in Minnesota. I work for the Appellate division. I've been an appellate public defender since I graduated from law school in 1985. So
that's a long time.
It's a very long time. I'm 36 years in.
I used to be a lawyer in the neighborhood law office. Those jobs have a high burnout ratio. I mean, what is key for you to have stayed with it so long?
I have worked for and with some amazing people. So I get a lot of support in my work. And I so far haven't lost my passion for the mission.
So tell the people, I think they'll be interested, just exactly what do you do as a public defender who's in the appellate division?
Right, so people who are accused of crimes who don't have enough money to hire a lawyer are entitled to a lawyer at public defense.
That's the law, right?
At public expense. That's the law. That's in the Constitution. And so if they don't have money, they get appointed a public defender. If they're Minnesota, we have trial public defenders and we have appellate public defenders. So there are teams of trial lawyers all over the state who represent people at the trial level, and if they're convicted and they want to appeal their conviction, they're still entitled to a public defender, and then that's me.
So I do recall at one time one of your compatriots in that office said that your clients are not what you would call model citizens. Is it difficult representing the type of people you do?
Not at all. Not even
Really?
one little bit. Not even one little bit. My clients are all people who have been thrown into the system. Whether it's their fault or not their fault is really none of my concern. What is my concern is that they're entitled to the best representation that anybody is entitled to because of our constitutional system of democracy.
So I suppose the key word I said was that they aren't model citizens, but they are citizens. And what does that mean?
Well, they're not necessarily even citizens of the United States. They're people. They're humans who happen to be in the criminal justice system in the United States. And under our Constitution, everybody's entitled to vigorous, competent representation, and I'm super passionate about making sure that everybody's rights are honored and guarded and protected.
So I got to switch to Jeff in a bit, but I do want to ask. You've appeared before me, dozens of times, I would say. So what it is like? How do you prepare, and what is it like to argue before the Minnesota Supreme Court?
Well, it's a huge responsibility to represent someone in the most important situation they've ever been in. Usually for my clients, it's life in prison when I end up at the Minnesota Supreme Court. So it's a huge responsibility, and it can be intimidating because the justices are the supreme law of the state.
We're just other human beings, right?
Just other human beings who hold all the power and a lot of the knowledge, and I have to spend a lot of time preparing and anticipating and crafting the best arguments for my clients.
Yeah, but you don't often win. Is that discouraging?
Oh man, if you had to look at the W's and the L's, it would be discouraging, but I think the win for me is that the system allows people to have a voice and that I get to be that voice. And so my win is that I make sure that my clients' voices are heard when I go to the Supreme Court.
Often you frame and shape the law, though, don't you?
I don't think it's me. I think I nudge and I encourage.
Oh, come on. It's the Anderson question I would ask you. I've asked you, well, counsel, if you could write the opinion for this court, and I know you want to win, how would you write it? And you would tell the court basically how the law could be shaped and how it should be shaped.
It's pretty awesome to get input into shaping the law, whether or not you and your colleagues agreed. It's pretty awesome to be asked for my input. And again, a huge responsibility.
Yeah. I would always make a point to ask, so, or try to.
Yeah, you did.
And I always tell people, be prepared for that question. Jeff, I want to switch over for you. I mean, okay, you both argue before the court. You have different styles. Melissa, I mean, you can tell. She's passionate, she's intense, and you know she's prepared. And I mean, I'd love to ask her questions, and because I know I'd get good answers and we'd have a good dialogue and question. Your style is a little more laid back.
Guilty.
Guilty, huh?
Yes, guilty. I'm not I don't go in with a list of the things I want to say. I argued a case yesterday in the Court of Appeals, and I had 9 words on the page that I used in preparation for the argument. I like to think that, in doing what I do and what I've done for 35 years, that I've spent 35 years preparing for yesterday's oral argument. And if I allow myself to not get mired in the page and get mired more, or to talk about why we're here, how did we get here, what's happened, since the days that the Constitution was inked, what happened between then and now, how did we get there? And so I'm a little more big picture maybe than most.
Okay, that's a good transition point, big picture. You have had a significant role in shaping a lot of Minnesota law, particularly in the area of forensics. Can you tell us a little bit about what you've done in this area?
Sure. Well, science is a favorite of mine. I'm a bit of a geek. I like science. I think science is important. And I think we need to be very careful about the way we use science in the courtroom.
Oh, wait. We? Who's we?
We, the people, need to be careful because we are all the government in this country. And, when I fight for an individual, and, people often confuse the idea that, well, geez, you're a criminal defense lawyer. Does that mean you're in favor of crime? And of course I'm not in favor of crime. Nobody is in favor of crime. Everybody wants to live in a safe community. But the way we get policed in our community, whether it's my client being pulled over and charged with a DWI, or me being pulled over, or you being pulled over and charged with the same crime, the point is that whatever system we come up with, it has to be good enough for all of us. Not just that we have this is the outcome we want. One of your great companions on the Supreme Court, once Justice Rosalie Wall, once wrote that justice is not an outcome, it's a process. And the process is so important. And again, those words that we fight about, they haven't changed in 200 plus years since they were first brought into our Constitution. It's the culture that we live in the moment that breathes life into those tired old words. Either we care or we don't.
I mean, use justice, you know, is a process. I mean, it's a phrase taken from the play and movie The Winslow Boy, which says that justice is the easy part, doing the right thing, that's the hard part. Would that apply?
Yes, because that's the question of the culture. These are dusty old words on dusty old documents unless we, the people, breathe life into these words. Otherwise, they mean nothing. And if our culture is to ignore, you know, oh, we really like the Second Amendment, but the fourth one we don't care much for, that plays out in our courts. And the courts, your job when you were on the court was to not favor one over the other, not to think, well, this guy was probably guilty, so I'm going to find a way to uphold a conviction. That's the real hazard for you folks, and I would think very much the hard part of the job of knowing that somebody is probably very guilty, but still that the process wasn't fair. And therefore, at a minimum, we're going to start the process all over again.
So you would second what Melissa said, is that the people you represent, whether they're citizens or not, have rights under the Constitution, and your job is to see those rights are vindicated?
Absolutely, and they may not be the most popular folks on the planet.
Well,
they're not.
They're
not. But it is in that particular arena where, I mean, remember, these rules are designed to protect the innocent, and if we change the rules because we want to get the guilty guy, the guy we're pretty sure is
guilty is in quotes, right?
Right. If we want to get and make sure this guy stays guilty, and we do violence to the Constitution in the process to achieve a particular outcome, that's why justice is not an outcome. Justice is the process.
I think you have just described in one way that what makes America great. Mm-hmm. We have a commitment to individual rights, and the two of you are there to defend it.
But it's also the thing that makes it fragile.
Why is it fragile?
Because the words mean nothing if the culture is unwilling to support them.
Do you see that, Melissa, at all out there in the culture, that people kind of are derisive to what you do?
Do you know, I, in my personal relationships, people I talk to about my work get it and are very supportive.
Ultimately.
And encouraging.
But on day one.
Right, and I do spend a fair amount of time when I've talked to people about my work, just talking about how do you defend those people.
And so part of what we're doing here today it's part of education, you know, is that, you know, Jefferson said, you know, we're a country where the people are sovereign, and we got to educate people as their right. So that's part of what you're here for and what you're about. But before we run out of time, and we're, you know, in the last 10 minutes, forensic science evidence. You know that I was kind of tenacious on forensic evidence because it's very powerful. What's your experience with science and forensic evidence?
Well, so many sciences that we, that's the thing about, and again, as a defender, I get to fight about, you know, how easily the state, the prosecutor is, and how eager they are to accept every new science, forensic science that comes along, that helps.
Why did they do that?
In the process of, because it helps in the process of convicting. And people are always looking for an easy path. And there's nothing better from a lawyer's perspective than putting an expert, putting a scientist on the witness stand, to have that scientist tell the jurors, well, here's what you don't understand. This, you know, a fingerprint means X, Y, or Z, or whatever science. The problem is that so many of the forensic sciences that have been used to put people in prison over the last 2 centuries have turned out to be nonsense.
So here's the, now DNA, that's pretty powerful evidence, right?
It is.
And it's actually, DNA has been used to prove the fallacy of some other scientific evidence.
It has indeed.
As a defender, I would expect that you would be glad to see that result with DNA.
Well, as a citizen, I'm glad that that tool is available. I will tell you that the early shots at
It was
DNA
terrible, wasn't it?
were quite fraught and flawed.
I wrote opinions on that,
yeah.
pointing out the flaws.
And so we need to, as a court, as again, back to your side of the bench, need to be willing to acknowledge when we've made mistakes, and that's difficult in our system of precedent, where it's very easy to point to a case from 15 years ago that said DNA in this form ought to come into evidence. The problem is that while we get mired in precedent, scientists are working every day and either proving or disproving the things that we thought were true in the past.
So
and we're very unwilling to accept that the scientists might have been wrong.
So before we want to, you have been pretty tenacious with respect to the testing of citizens for blood alcohol. Has some of that science been flawed?
A great deal of that science is flawed, and we fight about that every day. Oh, gosh, do we want to go inside baseball on that? I just the device we used, even in Minnesota today, that uses infrared analysis to analyze a person's breath alcohol concentration. Most people think you blow into the machine and it's actually measuring alcohol, but in infrared analysis, it's not measuring alcohol at all. It's measuring a loss of light. So you blow into the machine, you fill up the little chamber with your breath, and at one end of the chamber is an infrared light source, and the other end of the chamber is an infrared light collector. And all it's doing is measuring how much light got lost between point A and point B, which isn't about alcohol, it's about a loss of light. And the assumption is that because the alcohol molecule does absorb infrared light, then we're confident that whatever light got
but science
lost.
has given us, should I say, redundancy, so you can, double check, cross check. Did the state use that redundancy?
Well, they bought a machine that has the redundant process built into it, and then designed the software so that if the two testing methods disagreed with one another, it would shut that test down and say, hey, look, this is a person who shouldn't be tested using their breath. It's giving us a false reading because the two
Do they use that?
The two don't agree. Well, when it disagreed with each other too often, they just shut off half of it, so it stopped disagreeing with itself.
And so
to me, that's not science.
That's part of your job, to point out some of the deficiencies in how science is used.
Absolutely.
But before I leave this, having an expert testify is pretty powerful evidence on the stand.
Absolutely.
How do you overcome that?
Well, you either bring your own expert, or if you're me and you're a geek and you like science, you develop the expertise yourself so that you can call them out when they get adrift.
You can ask the right questions. Right? Part of a lawyer's job.
It is. It's part of what we we learned all sorts of things in law school, but breath testing was not one of them.
That's called the practice of law. You learn as you.
Indeed.
Melissa, I have a question for you. And one of your colleagues once told me, who'd been in public for a long time, said the nature of your client has changed over time. Sometimes now the clients are more hardened, more more bad people than they used to be. Do you see that at all?
Do you know, I don't think of any of my clients as bad people. I think of them as people who, for one reason or another, may have done something bad. But I hate to define anybody by a bad thing that they did, particularly when it comes to how I represent them and how I give voice to whatever their concerns are about the process.
So that attitude approach really does help you then in your job, is how you go forward to do it well.
It keeps me motivated to help, and it keeps me from being jaded, which I think is a problem.
That's a real danger for public defenders to become jaded, and you protect yourself against that.
I try to. I try to find something good in everybody came into this world as a tiny, darling, lovable, cuddly baby. And something good is in everybody, and they deserve whatever help I can offer them.
So I'm going to use that as a pivot point. You were a lovely, cuddly baby who grew up in Chicago in the background of airplanes. Your father's. So I understand you fly. Can you tell us a little bit about what you do with flying?
Sure. Well, I grew up in a house where we had a hangar in our backyard called
An airplane hangar in your
yes,
backyard?
a hangar home community and in suburban Chicago, and I grew up fixing and flying airplanes. My dad was the local mechanic for everyone who had airplanes nearby, so I always say if you didn't learn to fly living in my house, it was your own fault. It wasn't.
So you still fly?
I do. I fly all the time. I am now a commercial pilot.
You're commercial?
I am. I'm a commercial pilot, and I fly for the Commemorative Air Force, which is a nonprofit World War II museum out at the South St. Paul Airport. And I have been doing that for probably for 10 years now for them. And we help people experience flight.
So, Melissa, you trusted him to fly your 80-year-old mother?
I did. I do. He
And
flies
she
my
liked
children, my grandchildren. Our daughter's a pilot.
Oh, really? I don't have time to get in it. I mean, I noticed on the screen it shows that you're running, declared for Dakota County Attorney. I'm not going to get into that. That's not the purpose of this show. But you do understand that Dakota County is one of the best run counties, not only in the state, but the nation. I've been around. Are you up for that awesome responsibility to not mess things up if you become the county attorney of such a well-run county?
My intention is to make it better.
It is. And you have some ideas on that.
I do indeed have some ideas on that.
Well, we're going to have to leave that for another day. You should talk to Alan Miller. Maybe you can convince him to come on. But for now, we're done. Thank you so much.
Thank you.